Hey, welcome to the Charlie Paparelli Show. I am Charlie Paparelli, and I'm so glad that you joined me and my guest, Robin Gregg. If you want to, every Friday we publish these episodes, and if in order to not miss an episode, if you would sign up, submit your email at paparelli.com, then you will be sure to be alerted that to every episode that comes out on Friday, and also the blogs that get published on Tuesday mornings. I am a 25 plus year angel investor, and during that time, I have met hundreds of entrepreneurs who have taught me how to start companies and how to grow them into very, very valuable assets. And that's why I started this show, is to interview entrepreneurs so that they could tell their stories. And it's in those stories that those pearls of wisdom are found for those who are thinking about becoming entrepreneurs or those of you who are entrepreneurs. So thanks for joining us. Today's topic is taking over from the founder and then going big. Taking over from the founder and then going big. There are two schools of thought here. One is you can take over for founders and then have a successful company, or once somebody takes over for the founder, it doesn't go well. Well, I think we're going to find out that it goes very well sometimes. Robin Gregg is my guest. Robin is the CEO of RoadSync. She's and which we're going to hear a lot more about. And she's an experienced FinTech executive and a Harvard MBA. I met Robin at an event that I host called Angel Lounge when she was an angel investor. She's smart. She's decisive. She's also a strategist and a leader. She went from VC to corporate life to angel investing, and now she's running a startup. So I think that you're going to find it's a great story. Welcome, Robin. I'm glad that you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure. So when we met at Angel Lounge.
Yep. We did. Yeah.
How did you ever get involved with this whole angel investing thing? It was sort of like you just appeared.
That's that's exactly what I normally do, just kind of appear out of nowhere. So I was really interested. I'd spent a long time at FleetCor. I had about a 7-year career. And for people who aren't familiar with FleetCor, they are the world's largest provider of commercial fuel card and payment solutions.
Oh.
And I joined that company pre-IPO. It was backed by 2 private equity firms when I joined. I really got to see sort of rocket ship growth at the company. And, after about 7 years, I ran their direct fuel card business in the United States. And I really wanted to do something entrepreneurial and it was just sort of a logical point for me to leave. And so I had started maybe like a year before planning for this. And I got involved with the ATDC, mentoring other businesses. So I actually connected to a couple startups at ATDC and was sort of trying to, get involved with them as an advisor. Another logical way to get involved with companies is to sort of start to make investments in them. So that was how I ended up, what led me to you.
How did you made a comment there, you said that I always wanted to do something entrepreneurial.
Mm-hmm.
How far back?
Yeah.
How far back does that desire to do something entrepreneurial? How far back does that go?
Yeah, I was always interested in being a business builder. I always liked to be in high growth environments, even when I was in a corporate setting. So like after business school,
before that?
I wasn't like the kid that was setting up the lemonade stand.
Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in West Virginia. My family's not originally from West Virginia, but my dad worked for the National Park Service and was acquiring land for the park system, specifically the Appalachian Trail.
Did your mother, was your mother working also?
On and off. Yeah. My mom when I was really little, was a stay-at-home mom. My parents, though, they originally did not go to college. They got married really, really young. They were high school sweethearts. They got married when they were 19. And am I getting that right? Yeah, I think they were that young. And they just recently celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, which is amazing.
That's great that you have your parents. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And,
How did they
they
make
just,
their way to West Virginia?
well, because my dad worked for the Appalachian Trail, acquiring land, and the midpoint of the Appalachian Trail is in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. It's this little
Who
town,
would
and so
have
we
known?
lived.
That's the
Yeah,
midpoint. So that's
yeah.
what is it, a 2,100-mile trail or something?
You know what? I totally should know, but I don't. And I've hiked pieces of it. I have not hiked the whole thing. I did not grow up. I grew up doing a lot of day hikes. I did not grow up camping or anything like that because my mom is not a camper. She was from
I'm
North
all over
Carolina.
that. I'm not a camper either. Yeah.
Yeah, well, my mom will go anywhere where she couldn't like plug in her curling iron and her hair dryer. So that was very limiting in terms of what we were going to do as a family. But
I can relate to her. I had a guy once tell me that he says, roughing it for me is a Hilton with slow room service,
Yeah, I would say my family was definitely that, but my mom, I mean, she had like this crate of beauty supplies and they had to come. So that was not going to be consistent with camping.
How did she ever get, together with your dad? You talk about two different sides of the street, he's an outdoorsman.
Yeah, no, totally. He definitely is. My dad wears his hiking boots with everything, much to my mother's dismay. Like even like suits and stuff like that. He has his hiking boots. Because for his job, he never knew. Like they'd be out negotiating a land deal and he'd have to go out and hike it. So he always wears his boots. And it drives my mom bonkers. But
so he was acquiring land for the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah, that's right.
You never think about, you think that those trails were there forever and that pioneers just sort of walked them. So this is something that was decided, we need a trail.
Yeah.
Give us a quick, I know this has nothing to do really but I'm just interested now. What's the quick history of that Appalachian Trail and how it got there?
Gosh, you know what? I don't know. I don't know if this was like a Teddy Roosevelt thing, but it was sort of an early parks project to have a trail that goes from Maine to Georgia. And so, but a lot of it was privately owned for a really long time. Pieces of it were owned by the government. And so my dad spent his entire career acquiring the rest of it and sort of making sure that almost all of the trail today is owned by the Park Service. And then they also have a buffer around it so that, or, national parks are adjacent to it that they own as well. But that was really his life's work.
How many miles do you think did he ever say how many miles of that trail
I should have asked him.
Acquired?
I don't know a lot of it. I mean, he had almost a 50-year career there.
50.
Yeah. So, I mean, as I mentioned, my parents didn't go to college right away. My mom eventually ended up going to college, but my dad started in the mailroom. I think he might have been 17 with the National Park Service and just worked his way up. And that's how he ended up. What? Donald King. Isn't that funny? My father's name is Donald.
Donald Gregg.
King. My maiden name is King.
Oh, so Donald King. So if I read any kind of history books about the Appalachian Trail, he's got to be in it.
Yeah, he got inducted to the National Park Service Hall of Fame, I think. I'll send you the link. I'll find it. I'll send it to you.
No, that'll be great.
Yeah.
I'd love that.
Yeah.
So did you grow up an only child?
No, I'm the oldest of two. I have a younger brother. He's 3 years younger than me. And we moved to West Virginia when I was 6. And so my parents still live there. So, most of their lives. So that's all you
remember is West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's all that it's ever been. So is your brother in business?
No, he is decidedly not. He's an engineer. He got his degree from UVA and he is a patent examiner for mechanical brakes for the U.S. Patent Office.
Specifically for mechanical brakes.
Yes, specifically for mechanical brakes.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So he must be very different than you personality wise also.
Yes. He's very much an introvert and he says it's my fault. So he said that as children, I would not let him talk.
Who would compete? Yeah. Who would compete with you? That would be tough.
That's right. It's all my fault.
But it's interesting. You have some of the same background in that my father wasn't with the parks, but he was on the railroad. And one of the things I always find interesting is, so you grew up, as I did, not hearing anything about business.
Yes, that's totally true.
Nothing, right? So so then you move into, you went to, I think you went to what, Washington and Lee?
I did. Yeah. I mean, I guess, so first of all, you're totally right. I grew up not hearing about business. Like, in my hometown, people who went to college, like not a very large percentage of my high school went to college. First of all, we had very high dropout rates, and only 5 people from my graduating class even left the state. And so,
no kidding.
Yeah, that's it. Just 5 people. And I mean, we're the part of West Virginia that's like 30 minutes from Maryland and 30 minutes from Virginia. So it's like not a stretch of the imagination to leave the state, but very few people did. And I kept fluctuating between wanting to be a lawyer or a doctor, because those were the folks in town that I saw that had their degrees other than teachers. And so in my mind, the thing that you did if you went to college was you became a lawyer, doctor, or teacher. And so that was it. That was sort of the world I saw.
How did being female in that town affect you? It's interesting that you should say doctor or lawyer, and that you weren't being pushed into sort of the what I'll call the stereotypical female roles of saying, oh, you should be a nurse, or you should be a teacher, or, it's interesting you should bring that up. So were you encouraged in that way?
Yeah, I definitely was. I mean, I was so out of the norm where I grew up that I don't know. I don't feel like the stereotypes really impacted me. I was just sort of an odd kid regardless.
What made you so odd? Why did you?
Well, because I just was very academic and very achievement oriented. And, they called me, I was a cheerleader, but I was called the nerd cheerleader. I was, and used to read books before games. So like all the other girls would be like, doing their hair and chit chatting. I'd be reading a book, and it was just sort of my own. I was always my own person throughout high school.
That's sort of the way God made you, and that's it.
Yeah. So I just did.
How'd you deal with those differences? Did you ever feel like you needed to sort of do what other people were doing to kind of please them and fit in, if you will?
Well, clearly, because I was a cheerleader. Like they were just sort of completely inconsistent with like the rest of my personality.
Yeah, but you weren't all the way in. Okay.
Yeah,
you were reading books before you were doing cheerleading, right?
That's true. I don't know. I did. I think it was hard for me, but I was very fortunate that, my parents are fantastic and very, very much encouraged me. I mean, my dad, like every morning used to ask me, what was I going to do good for the world that day? Like that day, every morning, What are you going to do good for the world? You could be president, you could be anything, you could be like, and that was what I heard from my father constantly, and my mom too. But I do think for a woman, like growing up with a dad that like literally thinks you can take on the world, I will say my dad is like that about me, and is just a gift, and really changes your worldview. It kind of protects you from what the rest of the world thinks, because your dad thinks you can do anything.
My sister is 11 years older than me, and we're quite a bit. I'm quite a bit older than you are. And she had a father, on the other hand, that was different. He was always pushing her in to not even go into college, but to become a secretary or to become. She eventually did go to college. She's got 2 master's degrees, one in Master of Fine Arts and one as a master in English. And then she went on to become a professional artist, So she did everything that he told her she wasn't allowed to do societally. And you had the opposite of that. You had somebody to say the world's your oyster, right? I mean, that's pretty cool. So it was cool. So you're in this small town in West Virginia. What town was it?
It's called Martinsburg.
West Virginia.
Martinsburg, West Virginia. If you travel up 81, that's where you can stop off and go to the bathroom on the whole way up north.
Well, that's one of the prettiest rides, though, getting through there on 81.
Yep.
I used to take my daughter to school in upstate New York. We used to cut through there, and I'd say, "Man,
you probably
gorgeous." There wasn't a lot there, but it was gorgeous.
Yep.
So how did you decide to go to Washington? Did you graduate as the valedictorian in your high school?
I did. Yep, I did.
All right.
Yep, I did.
So why Washington and Lee?
So when I was in, so West Virginia has this thing in 8th grade, I think it's in 8th grade, where you can take a test on West Virginia history. And if you score, I don't know, if you're the top scorer on this test on West Virginia history, they knight you a Lord and Lady of the Golden Horseshoe. And so you go to the state capitol and you get knighted a Lord and Lady of the Golden Horseshoe, and you get a little pin. And so driving through, because the state capital is not close to West Virginia. You have to kind of go all the way through Virginia, and you will go through Lexington, Virginia. And so when I was a kid, I saw Washington and Lee. At the time, I think it was all male. It was all male until 1986. So it was either on the verge of becoming co-ed or still all male when I went through there. And it's just beautiful. Like, you've never been to the school. It's absolutely gorgeous and very, exactly what you would imagine for a college experience. And I just became enamored with it and wanted to go.
I love that. I think that that's true with people, is you kind of look at some of these colleges and you go, well, that's what a college should look like, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was nothing more than that. And I desperately wanted to go there. So I applied. If you're a valedictorian in West Virginia, you get a lot of incentives to go to state schools. And so that was what I was competing against. And, my parents were public servants. My mom at this point ended up becoming a school nurse, but was, only doing it. Was she a school nurse yet? She was a nurse. I don't think she was a school nurse yet, but, wasn't, my family, I didn't grow up with a wealthy family. And so I had to be smart about it. And a private school wasn't sort of in the budget. But I got lucky and got a scholarship there. And so I ended up being able to attend. Yep.
Did that include room and board?
Yep. Yes, it did.
So it was purely full ride.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was an interesting experience because they used to write me a check for, I had cash for like my meals and other stuff that I had to figure out. And so I had to figure out I had my own checkbook and I had to figure out my own finances at 18. And, did a pretty good job at it. But in retrospect, that seems insane to me. I have a 14-year-old and I'm like, I can't imagine. Maybe he could do it in 4 years, but it's just hard to imagine being like, hey, dude, you're going to get a check at the beginning of your semester and you're going to have to figure out your finances for the, rest of the school year. That sort of blows my mind that's what I did.
We certainly don't impose that sort of responsibility on 18-year-olds anymore, right?
Right.
Like we sort of, in fact, I remember when my kids started going to school, there was they are reading an article that there's this whole level of administration now to deal with in colleges, to deal with the parents and their involvement with their children.
Yeah.
Well, that certainly was not the case when I went to school. And I don't think it was the case when you were there either. You were on your own.
No, I was totally on it. Yeah. I mean, my parents were very supportive, but that was, I was a big kid. So they were married not too far, much older than I was when I was in college. So to them, they're like, yeah, it's time for you to figure it out.
So your father, you don't know anything really about business. You saw lawyers and doctors in your home and said, oh, that'd be a pretty cool thing to do. Okay. So what do you do when you go? So now here's the world's your oyster, right? This is your first step into life.
Yeah.
College was very confusing for me. I thought I wanted to be one thing and I didn't cut it. And so then I had to figure out another thing, and that took a long time. What about you? How did that go?
Oh yeah, no, I was completely the same way. So my high school was one of the only high schools in the state that had a Japanese program. So I actually took Japanese in high school. And at the time, and that time period, Japan was taking over the world, right? Like it was Japan Inc. It was, Japan was very much in the news. And so I went to 92.
92. Okay.
92. Yep. And so I went to school and I wanted to be a Japanese major. And my parents were like, that is nonsense. You're not
I love them. Yeah. Totally impractical, right?
That's it. My parents were like, no, you are not doing that. Just do something else with it. And so I started off school being a Japanese and physics double major.
Okay.
And so did that for a year and really disliked physics immensely. Was fine at it, but just didn't really like where it was going to take me. So I ended up becoming an econ major. And so that's how I ended up.
What did you see where physics would take you?
I originally was planning on being an engineer, and which is kind of completely bizarre to go into liberal arts school and want to be an engineer. But I thought about it and I wasn't excited about what I was doing, and I think because of my Japanese classes were more, they were sort of, was the language, but also the culture and the history. Is my connection bad? It seems like it might be a little slow.
Yeah.
How are we
But
doing?
I'm hearing you well. I'm not seeing you that well. But so
Yeah.
I'm not
Hopefully it'll clear
sorry
up.
about that. It'll get better again, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I took an econ
But it
class
is
as part of
interesting
my.
what happens when
Yeah.
we go to school like that, particularly with our kinds of background, meaning we didn't
Yep.
know what business was, right? And we
Hmm.
didn't know what a lot of occupations were. We weren't
Right.
talked about. And so what you start seeing a little bit further ahead when you start studying it and say, this is what it looks like if you graduate with this and you start doing this, right?
Right.
And you go
Right.
like, I don't think that's me.
That's right. That's
Right.
right. That's right. Yeah, it wasn't the life I imagined for myself. And
Right.
so, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I
So
became
how do you
an
get it? So if you say I'm not going to be an engineer,
Mhm.
okay, I'm still interested in Japan or
Yes,
Japanese, right? I mean, where do you go with
yep.
that next? How did you navigate that to say, well, I do
Yeah,
have to graduate, right? It's a 4-year degree. It's a 4-year full ride. So I need to get on it.
that's right. And then, and my parents had already said, no, if you're going to be a Japanese major, we're supportive of that, but you got to combine that with something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'd taken an econ class and really liked it. I also, I was part of this honors program at Washington Lee, which I don't know if they still have. And I had this like cross functional class about the Great Depression and learning about the economics and the history and the social impact of the Great Depression. And that sort of got me interested in that. And so I think that's how I ended up becoming an econ major, because I took that class early in my sophomore year. And so switched, and that's what I ended up doing. And still at that point, didn't really know that I think I wanted to be in business. Like I sort of thought that
Yeah,
maybe
because
I
what do
would.
you do as an econ major? I mean, what's the expectation on the other
You
end?
could either more school, right? You could be a PhD, or you could. I was thinking I might want to be a lawyer at some point. So I think when
Still,
I graduated, so I started thinking I might want to be a lawyer and get my MBA. And I had a professor, sort of a Japanese econ professor, who studied the Japanese car industry. And so I was a research assistant for him for the summer and learned a lot about, basically what was going on with the car industry in Japan. And sort of, I think that was sort of my introduction into business and becoming interested in it.
I bet you that also being an econ major, just thinking about this, is that it was also your introduction to strategy. And what I
Yes,
mean by that
yes.
is that as an econ major, like you're saying, you're studying big movements. It's almost
Mhm.
macroeconomics, right? Where big
Yep,
movements and systems and how all of this fits together. How did
yep,
that affect you?
yep. Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. I mean, econ can be kind of abstract,
Yep.
and I always sort of migrated to more of the micro impacts. I was definitely more interested in, you know, thinking about more about the stories of how it was, impacting the businesses, and that was part of the economy. But not so interested in sort of thinking about supply demand curves or whatever. I mean, I'm pretty far removed from that
I
major,
see.
but yeah.
It's funny, I'm reading Tom Stowell. It's
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
Tom Stowell Reader is what it's called, and it's really it's just a compilation of all of his writings, which
Uh-huh.
I'm so impressed with that guy. I'm like, man, he should be the advisor to all presidents, kind of going forward. I mean, he's so
Yeah.
practical and so
Yeah.
logical in the way that he approaches things. I've really been impressed. So that's
Yeah.
been my exposure now to one of your economists here, who took it all the way. I guess he was probably a PhD, also taught at Harvard, did he?
I don't know actually.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought he
No,
did.
I'll have to check him out.
So who was your biggest influence in college that sort of directed your life, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I think the nice thing about going to a really small school is that you do get really close to the professors,
Hmm.
and you have the opportunity to do that. So, I think my junior year, Washington Lee has a spring term, but it's like a kind of couple week sort of term that you can travel, or you can do like a short kind of interesting class. And we had two professors that took us to Europe, and we studied
They
the
took you
monetary.
to Europe.
Mhm. Yeah, it took
Okay.
15 of us. I mean, think about, can you imagine taking 15, 20, and 21-year-olds to Europe? That sounds
Not
horrible to
today.
me. But they did. They took it. So Professor Hooks, Linda Hooks, was a female econ professor at Washington Lee. It was very influential to me. And she was one of the professors that led the trip. And they took us to banks, and, we were really exploring, because the monetary union hadn't happened yet. And we were really exploring what was likely to happen. And it was just, it was, and they spent a lot of time having us go to businesses in these different markets. And I just found that super interesting. And then she also helped me find my first job. So she recommended me to economics and management consulting firm called Charles River Associates, which was my first job. And it was one of her classmates for her PhD program was a principal there. And so that's how I got my first job.
That's what Charles River is.
Yes. Yeah.
You said you found that visiting these businesses was super interesting. What did you find so interesting about them?
Well, first of all, the culture. I do. I mean, it's been a really long time, but I think kind of seeing, I think the biggest thing I was struck by was sort of the corporate culture, the differences in the corporate culture in the different markets. I mean, because in most cases, we're going to a bank or a major corporation within each of these markets. And it became very clear how they function, what their corporate culture was like. Were they casual? Were they formal? How did they dress? Like, I think I was really struck by how different it was. Wow. And yeah, it was, I mean, that was probably the most striking thing.
You point to culture. I thought you were going to be saying something else completely different, but culture impacted you.
Yeah, it did. It was very striking because it was just so different. Because they were all basically doing the same business, the same, they were similar businesses, but they were wildly different in terms of the culture and dynamic.
Business that really kind of interested you as much as the culture of the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really was. I think
what does that say about you as you kind of think back on that? Because you're very analytical, I mean, so it's interesting that you should pick up on what I'd call the soft side,
Yeah. I mean, culture matters, right? And I think also for
culture matters a lot. I'm not saying that. It's just interesting.
Culture matters, but also, I think that's important. I mean, I was very young, right? And I think, I didn't know much about the business beyond sort of what I could observe, that was something that was easy for me to observe and sort of, I guess I must have been thinking about where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And so I was kind of testing it, like, oh, could I work here? Could I work in a French bank? And I was like, no, could I work in so I think that might've been why, because I was I was a junior and I was exploring what I was going to do next. So I think that's maybe why that struck me. Not so much because culture always sticks out to me, but because I was sort of road testing future careers for myself. And, that was probably the most striking thing.
So how come, I'm sure that you had with these professors that because you were valedictorian, you were on a full ride. I mean, I'm sure that there must have been some of them that were pushing you to an academic career.
Yeah. Well,
how did you evaluate that? And how did you just say, no, that's not going to be me?
Well, I wasn't done exploring, right? So the reason I chose management consulting was because, and specifically Charles River Associates, they had a great track record of people going on to graduate school afterwards. But it wasn't one thing. Like a lot of people went to get their PhDs because a lot of the partners were PhDs. Mm-hmm. A lot of people went to business school. A lot of people went to public policy programs. And so it was another way to sort of continue my education in some ways and leave my options open. And so that's why I found it really compelling was, I wasn't saying no.
You graduated and then went full time to Charles River.
Yep, I did. Okay. Yep. And that was because of that professor. I mean, that professor was really influential to me in ways she probably didn't even really imagine. Like, I didn't even know what to wear to interviews and business interviews. So and I'm in Lexington, Virginia. There's not a lot of shopping options.
Yeah.
My parents hadn't been business professionals. And so I went in her office and I was like, where do I buy a suit? What do I buy? You can't just click and buy it on the internet. And so she helped me find my first suit and told me places to go, told me what to buy. I mean, no detail too small, which sounds sort of naive of me, but I just didn't have anybody to ask.
No, I'm with you. I mean, exactly the same thing happened to me. Is
Mhm.
I didn't come from professional parents, if you will, right?
Right,
So
right,
how do you learn those things? You look at our kids and I look at my kids and I see how they
yep,
grew up, and they grew up just seeing this, and it's all
right,
subconscious and how it all plays to them. So they didn't think about, well, how do I dress for an interview? They saw how their
right,
father dressed all the time. They see how their mother dresses. They hear you
yep,
talking about this big meeting you have with venture capitalists, and is it your son? Yeah,
yep,
so he's
yeah,
watching and hearing all this stuff,
that's
even
right.
if you're not being instructive. But we didn't have that. So it's so wonderful
Yeah,
that you found somebody that
yeah,
took you
yeah,
under her wing to take care
yeah.
of you.
Yeah, I do remember that conversation quite vividly because she was like surprised to be asked, but was very kind and very gracious about it.
What made her take you under her wing? What do you think she saw in you?
Well, I mean, I so women were still only one third of the student body when I was at Washington and Lee,
Okay.
because it was still transitioning from being a co-ed, a all male school,
Right.
and then for econ majors specifically, I think we only had 5 women econ majors. So I was I was one of the few women trying to do what she had done, and so
Yeah.
I think that there was some affinity there. And she's
Did
just a
she take
wonderful
care of
human.
the other 4 women too?
I think she did. They may have been less needy, but I think she did.
All
I think she definitely
right.
did. Yes.
Well, I think one thing that you said that kind of had me think about your dad is you made the comment, I wasn't done exploring.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
wonder if part of that comes from him, because that was his job, was to sort of explore these West Virginia mountains and these
Yep.
trails, right? And to say, where can I? That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
graduated. So what happened at Charles River that sort of that
Mhm.
said not academia?
Yep.
How did Charles River affect you and your
Yeah.
career?
So I worked in their Washington D.C. office, and the main thing they did there was sort of antitrust litigation. So like
Oh yeah,
evaluating mergers and acquisitions, or other litigation. So we were working on valuing oil from the war that had happened, the Iraq War, like with trying to figure out not the what was it? It was sort of remember the fires in, I guess it must have been in the 80s. Oh, my
uh-huh.
history's bad. So we're trying to figure out like damages from what had happened in the oil refineries, and just doing a lot of economics related work that was related to either global or sort of
Sounds like an awful lot of
US literature.
research is what you were doing.
Well, a lot of analytics, right? It was basically building the models to sort of value damages or
I see.
value market share or value, um, you know, value what market penetration would look like in certain things if two entities sort of were merged. So we did a lot of work in that space.
When you joined this company or
Yeah,
working in it, how long were you at Charles River?
I was there for 4 years.
For 4 years. Was there
Mhm.
somebody that replaced that professor as sort of a mentor advisor for you that helped you?
Yeah, yes, there was it was another woman who was one of the principals there who was great and really encouraged me to sort of push my career and my thinking. And one of the things I really wanted to do was actually get into the management consulting side of the business. I'd done a project with them initially. And that the management consulting practice at Charles River Associates that I worked with had a very technical focus. So the practice I worked with did metals and materials. So it was just like market studies for aluminum can plants or molybdenum or lithium, or just figuring out sort of where to sort of help these global metals and materials companies figure out market share, market penetration, where to put their facilities, how to distribute and stuff like that. And I really wanted to move into that division, which was based out of Boston. And so this woman was very helpful in kind of encouraging me to do that, and also encouraging me to think broader about my career. because I remember telling her that I wanted to go to UVA for law school and business school. And she's like, that's great. UVA is a great school, and it totally is a great school. She's like, but you're going to apply to Harvard, right? And I was like, no, I'm not going to apply to Harvard. I went
Was
to
Harvard even on your mind?
No, not at all. Not even on my mind. And she's like, why not? Like, it should be. Like, why wouldn't you at least apply? You can choose not to go if you get in, but like, you should apply. And, she's the first person that made me think that was possible.
But what was it? But it's not to go to law school. You applied to Harvard for
MBA. Eventually.
Why would you do that?
Why would I do that?
Because you wanted to be, like you said, I was going to go to UVA and I was going to be a lawyer, right? So I was going to go to law school.
No, I was thinking about doing.
And she says, "Whoop!" She's going to move.
No. It was so I was going to do a joint MBA law degree at UVA.
Okay,
that was my plan. So that was my plan, and she's like, "Okay, that's fine, but you should also apply to the other top programs. You could also do a joint MBA law degree at Harvard." And
is that what you applied for?
I did not ultimately. I did just decide I wanted to do my MBA program. I did actually I took the LSAT, and I was going to take the LSAT. I was in Boston, and I was in the room to take the LSAT, and I was sitting there. We're getting ready to start the test, and I'm like, I don't want to be a lawyer. Why am I sitting in this room? Why am I sitting in this room? And it was
where did that come from?
I don't know. I don't know if it was like a real aha, or I was just like, it was a beautiful day in Boston. I was in this building overlooking the Charles River, and it was, and I was like, gosh, I could be out there. And instead of taking this test, am I really going to go to law school? And then I was like, I'm not going to law school. So I packed up my stuff and I walked out, and I freaked out the entire room. I did. Yeah.
You didn't take the test. I love that.
No, I didn't take the test. I was like, I'm not doing this. This is ridiculous. Like I had gotten to the point where I needed to narrow my options, and I kind of knew that.
Prior to that, what am I doing here moment? Was there doubts leading up to that about becoming a lawyer?
There must have been. I mean, yes, absolutely. Because the nice thing about Charles River Associates was that I worked on a lot of litigation work, and we worked with the associates for a lot of the major law firms. And I got to see what the associates were doing and what their lives are like, and their job, and they'd be calling me at 11 o'clock at night about some piece of analysis. And I was like, why would I go to school to have their job and then have them call me? Like, ew, no, I don't know. This doesn't look like fun.
A lot of times I talk to lawyers. I have talked to lawyers over the years that didn't really want to be lawyers. That wasn't part of their plan, but they come out of college not knowing what to do. They had to be a something, right? So I guess I'm smart. I do okay in school. I'll be a lawyer,
right?
And not seeing what you saw. You had again seeing ahead at what it would be like to be a lawyer. I love that. I'm looking at the Charles River and saying it's pretty. Why am I here?
Right. I mean, it was very cool. I mean, it was a very cool job to be able to see exactly what corporate lawyers did. I mean, I saw the documents. I saw how the legal proceedings worked. And it was a very good window into that profession.
So how did you get in? So tell me about Harvard then. How did so you applied to Harvard? You took what test do you take for Harvard? Jury?
You take the GMAT.
GMAT. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you must have done well.
Yep.
And then you said, okay.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I think this is another funny story. I applied, and I applied to Harvard. I applied to Stanford. I applied to Duke. I applied to Kellogg. And then I don't remember who else I applied to, but I got on the wait list.
That's top drawer, all of them.
Yeah. So I got on the wait list at Kellogg. I got on the wait list at Harvard, and I got on the wait list, and then I got into Duke, and I thought I was going to Duke. And so I had even rented a house. And was all set to go to Duke. I was still on the wait list at the other schools. And probably about a month before school starts, I get a call from Kellogg, and I got into Kellogg. And so I got my plane tickets, and I got ready to go. And I was living in Boston at this time. And I got my plane tickets, and I was getting ready. I was getting ready to get on a plane to go to Chicago to find a place to go to Kellogg. And I got the call from Harvard, and I got into Harvard. And so that's where I ended up going. I ended up telling the poor guy who thought he was taking over my apartment that I was keeping it because I already lived close enough to campus to kind of keep my apartment.
It actually simplified your life then.
It did. Except I had like made all these arrangements to try to like live at other places. And
were you still single at the time?
I had a boyfriend that I was living with. Yeah.
Okay.
Much to my parents.
But you were like 25 years old.
I was 20. I was 26. Yes.
26 years old. My gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
But still pretty much on your own.
Yeah.
Just like when you entered college at 18.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah.
you've cut your own path. So then, what was your objective in going to? You've got a full-time job. How do you go to? At 26, you're making I'm thinking you're probably making okay money. You're living in Boston, right? So how do you decide? Nah, I'm going to go for my MBA now and hang all that up.
Well, almost everybody, because Charles River was such an academic place, everybody went to school somewhere eventually. And so, right? I mean, so just sort of you like run like 3 to 4 years, everybody was sort of done doing their next thing. And so it just sort of like, it's like you graduated. Like we all graduated from that professional experience. And so it was just time.
Their process was part of their normal process was you go for an advanced degree.
Yeah, you have to go to an advanced degree, and they don't care what it is. And
so do you stop working for them and go for the degree?
Yeah.
Well, how do you, I mean, you weren't making that much money that you put so much away. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
That.
No, not at all.
I could just take 2 years off and go to college and pay for the tuition.
Yeah, you take loans. You just,
you take loans. Okay.
You take loans. That's what I did.
These were probably the first loans in your entire life.
They were. Yeah. And I guess I should have been more frightened of the expense than I was. But and I was lucky enough because I did not have other assets, right? Because I was just me at this point in time. So I did get lucky.
Yeah, it's a big decision.
They actually gave me a fellowship. So I did get a small fellowship that was funded by Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots. Yes. And I used to have.
He's really the owner of Gillette. Just happens to be the owner of the New England Patriots.
That's right.
Okay.
But and so we had like once or twice a year, I'd have breakfast or lunch with Robert Kraft, and so he could see his investment. Yeah, all his little fellowship people. He had like, I don't know, 5 or 6 of us.
What were those conversations like? Were you nervous when you were going to meet him?
No, because I didn't like football. I had no idea. Like I was just sort of didn't really know. I don't know. I mean, I guess I should have been more nervous, but I really wasn't. I just was sort of interested because he's sort of a interesting personality. He'd wear his Super Bowl rings, I mean, it was just fun to see, and so he would ask.
He had a good shave and he wore rings, right?
Yeah, I mean,
and he talked about football. He didn't talk about business.
Oh no, he talked about both, but he did talk about football and sort of why he owned a football team. He told us that he owned a football team. Like he actually viewed it in some ways as like a community service. Like it was, it's something that everybody in New England just, got excited about. It was a cultural phenomenon to have the New England Patriots.
That's interesting that he said it that way, because that's how I always perceived Arthur Blank's owning of the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah.
He really sees it as a way to kind of pull the community together. Okay. Mm-hmm. And, where there's true diversity, I thought that he always had that approach.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what he said. And I mean, this was, I guess, in, 2000 was when I was going to business school. Mm-hmm.
So what were you so you go to business school. So now you really are you're with business people.
Right.
So you've got these academic degrees. So you're an economics major. Were you a double major in Japanese?
I did. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great.
Yes,
so
I did.
Japanese.
Yep.
And now you're dealing, and you come from being an economist, which is more an advisory type role, and you're probably in school now with business people.
Yep.
That came out of corporations and things, right?
Yeah.
How did you compete in that environment, and what did you learn from it?
First of all, I was very intimidated by it. and especially initially, because the credentials and what people had done, and people had started businesses, and I just started off like super duper intimidated by the whole experience. And it just took me a while to settle in and realize that I belonged there, and I had just as much to contribute. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about HBS is it's all case method, and a big part of your grade was about class participation, and which is fine. I don't mind speaking up in class, but like what I wasn't used to doing was elbowing my way in. Like, to be able to participate, you had to be very aggressive to get yourself in and to get yourself heard. And so I used to have this little note on the top of my notebook about like, you need to talk today. And so I would know I'd have to like get up and like figure out how to muscle my way into the competition.
Did you feel yourself, so to write that down, you must have felt yourself being pushed to the background?
I did. It was hard. It was very hard.
It's an easy place to sort of go, right? I mean, to say,
right.
well, I really shouldn't be here anyway, but I'll just kind of take it for what it is. But what you made a comment, you said at one point, you said, I was intimidated and I didn't know if I really fit in. Then one time I knew I did get to the point where I knew I deserved to be there.
Yeah.
What caused that sort of transition? And just thinking, it's only a transition in thinking. You're there already. You already got in. You're part of the class, but now you say, by God, I should be here. All right.
Yeah, I think so. I worked very, very hard my first semester to get good grades and to get involved in just sort of the school, into some of the activities and sort of what was going on in some of the clubs, and found that I did very well. Like, if I really, if it was important to me to get good grades in my classes, I could do that. Was it worth the time investment necessarily? Maybe not, but like, I needed to know that I could do things, and then I could make a choice of whether or not I wanted to make those investments. And so I kind of spent the first year figuring that out. Like, could I get the interviews for internships that I wanted that were competitive? Could I get good grades in some of these classes if I worked really, really, really hard at it? And, I guess I was achievement oriented. Like, I was just sort of like, I was looking at my results.
So did you ever do anything academically, like in these environments where you didn't succeed? Or did you always, if I put my mind to it, I'm going to excel?
I cannot remember a massive academic failure. I don't remember. I don't remember one. But I mean, I've definitely had other failures in my life. So I definitely don't think my life lesson has been, if I put my mind to it, it's going to work out. But there it did. And that was sort of affirming to me.
Well, when you decided to elbow your way in, as you put it, what did you say on the notebook? You said, you're going to talk. What did it say at the top?
You need to talk today.
You need to talk today. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So do you remember the first time that you elbowed your way in?
Yeah. I mean, I felt like I was rude. Like, that was, I did. I felt like I was rude. I was sort of like somewhat like embarrassed and ashamed.
Because you're dealing with all those Yankees up there, There is no rude up there.
Yeah, I felt really rude. It was very, very difficult to kind of get into that mode.
Were there a lot of women in the program at the time?
No, it was like, I think 20 to 25% at the time.
At the time, okay. Were the other women as aggressive as you?
We all had the same problem. A lot of us.
Did you guys stick together?
Yeah, I mean, sort of, but it was also, I don't know that we necessarily. It was every man for themselves. Like, not to, not as a pun, but like, you just sort of had to. Yeah, it was an individual experience, right? To get into to manage your class participation grade. But I would say it was not at all an unusual problem for some of my female classmates.
Did you feel any prejudice against women or discrimination against women by the people there? Did you feel like they don't think they don't think we are? I'm not just saying you personally, but they don't think that we are.
Yeah. So when I started school there, it is conventional for folks to join a study group. And it's basically a handful of people from your year that you prep your class lessons with. And you meet every day and you meet with your group of, I don't know, we'll say 4 or 5 people to prepare for your class. And so I'd met, there's this like jockeying to like find a good study group and finding the right people and find who you could like stand being with every day for like a whole year. And there's this like, a process to meet people at the beginning. And I was invited by some guys that I'd met to be in a study group. And I actually got, they brought me to the study group. I don't think the other people realized that Robin was a woman. And they said they wanted to have an all male study group.
Whoa. That's when so that was what happened when you showed up.
That's when I showed up. They were like, we wanted to have an all male study group. And so these guys were like, the guys who had invited me were like, what? Like, what? This is absurd. And it started to be really late. Like it was like all the groups had been forming. And so I was started to panic that I wasn't going to be able to be in a study group. Cause like, I get, ejected from the study group last minute, and these 2 guys broke off with me. And so we had an unusually small study group. We have 3 people. And
so those 2 guys stood with you.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Were they from the Northeast?
No, one was from Indiana and one was from North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they had business backgrounds as opposed to engineering backgrounds?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So they stayed with me. And so we had our little, all 3 of us had our names, Robin, Rich, and Rusty. So it was, the 3 of us.
I bet you guys still stay in touch too.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Rusty passed away, but Rich and I still.
Mm-hmm. How about that?
Yeah.
What an experience. Yeah. So what was, so when you look back on Harvard and that MBA, what is it that you look back on and say like, man, I look back fondly on something, but I also look the other way is to say, here's how it sort of launched me.
So first of all, I loved the access that I had to just people and information. I mean, the fact that I had breakfast with Robert Kraft, I met Meg Whitman. I had like a roundtable discussion with Meg Whitman. I got to see Warren Buffett speak. It's just such a cool experience to be there.
Great resources. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was amazing. And so I love that. I think the other thing is, I got a chance I was really interested in the newspaper industry, which is sort of a strange thing. So I actually ended up doing a research project for the Washington Post Company my second year. And, it took nothing more than me calling them up and saying, hi, I'm a, Harvard Business School second-year student. I'd like to use one of my classes to do a project with you. Are you interested? And they're like, sure. And so I got to meet Don Graham, and I got to work at the strategy group, or sort of the corporate group at the Washington Post Company.
What was that female owner of the Washington Post?
Catherine Graham. Yeah. And so I got to meet. Yeah. So I got to meet. No, she wasn't there anymore. I don't know if she was still alive, but I met her son, Don. Yeah.
You did meet John Graham. That's wonderful.
Don. Yeah, Don.
Don Graham. I'm sorry.
Don Graham. Yeah. It was sort of a.
Why did you get interested in the newspaper business?
I don't know, because I like to read, I think. Also because it was interesting to me how they were having to transform in sort of the digital era, right? Like what was the news?
What year was that at Harvard? What year were you?
It was 2001.
Oh, so it is. It's when the early stages of the internet.
Yeah. Oh, so
that's really cool. Yeah, they were in shock. They didn't know what to do.
Yeah, it was very interesting. So the project I did for them was looking at kind of newspaper forms that are appealing to the sub 35-year-old segment.
It's interesting to look back on that too, is to see it's taken 20 years to come to models that have proven themselves to work.
Right. No, exactly.
Even this last decade has really been about, is the Wall Street Journal have it right? Mm-hmm. And the New York Times was, we're going to go free. And then it's interesting, these different models that they
I know.
And then now we say, oh, this is what works. That took 20 years.
I know. It was but so I was fascinated by it. I really just thought it was a super interesting thing. I mean,
why didn't you go into the newspaper business?
Because I think we weren't hiring. It's a terrible time to get right?
But if they would have hired, you would have done it.
It would have taken 20 years to figure it out. They would have figured it out in 5.
Well, there's Robin, elbow her way in. No
That's right.
shortage of confidence there. That's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. But also part of the reason. So I entered business school in 2000. That was the still like .com boom, right?
Yeah.
Just hadn't busted quite yet. And I walked into business school, and like we had this like area where we had little mailboxes all crammed full of t-shirts and giveaways and invitations to dinners, and like, all the companies are still like wooing the MBAs and spending tons of money on parties and recruiting events. And then the bust happened. And then the fall
when did you graduate?
2002. So I was at school for September 11th, and saw the towers fall between classes and with my classmates, some of whom had worked in New York and in those buildings, and just saw, the economic condition of the company crumble, and worry that I wasn't going to be able to get a job. And that it just changed. I mean, it's a very shocking thing in the time period.
When all of that happened at that time, did you feel the companies that were wooing everybody, did they just sort of withdraw?
Vanish. Yes. Vanished.
What do you
just
do?
Nothing. I mean, there was still a couple of places hiring. So less of the management consulting and iBanking, and there was a problem about what to do, and
options, and you still had to make a decision as to what career am I going to follow, right?
Right. And I had thought I wanted to be a management consultant again, because I had done that at the end of my Charles River career. I worked in their management consulting practice and really enjoyed it. I liked the variety.
Makes total sense, yeah.
And then I did that for a summer internship. I worked for a company called the Parthenon Group, which was a Bain spin out in Boston, and had a great summer there. But I really wanted to do something more hands-on. Like, I didn't want to tell businesses what they should be doing with their business. I wanted to run a piece of a business and sort of have greater ownership. So I ended up joining Capital One. So Capital One recruited at HBS, and actually liked people who were ex-management consultants because they were highly analytical. And that's where I ended up going.
Was that in Boston?
It was in Washington, D.C. So I ended up going back down to Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And being close to my family. It was also an interesting time because there was actually a consumer credit crisis during that time, like right at the time I was joining. So they dramatically had to reshuffle Capital One right before I arrived. So my job, I thought I was going to be running the young adult credit card product, sort of a product manager job. And they ended up putting me in credit risk management, writing policies for credit risk management, which was not what a newly minted MBA Robin had in mind for her job whatsoever. And I was devastated.
So what do you do with that? I mean, because now you're sort of slotted in. The economy isn't
horrible.
Rebounded at all. It's horrible, right?
Right.
So I'm kind of like, okay, so here I am. And I'm doing work that I didn't invest 2 years in all these loans and everything, having all these wonderful contacts and this painting the sky kind of visions that they have when you come out of there. And I'm writing credit policies.
Yep. Yeah.
How do you get out of that?
I don't know. He was like really depressed for a little while. I was very upset about it. And then I think the other thing I did that I would not recommend was I was just a giant pain to all my managers at Capital One in the beginning. But just a giant pain. Like I just copious whining, put me in a different job. This is the wrong job. Where else can I go? They were very, they were very gracious about it in retrospect, and sort of putting up with,
it's funny that you called yourself. So you were whining.
I was totally whining. I just,
literally depressed.
I don't think so. Not in a clinical way, but I was just, I think I was just very, I think disappointed was really the word. But I also didn't say
something. If you didn't say something, you were slotted in and stuck.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be awful.
Yeah, and I was pretty aggressive about pushing.
Did you write
Anyone.
something on top of your notebook again on what you were going to do, what you were going to whine about today, and to whom?
No, I did not, but I did. And then I got better at it. So I do think I got more effective at my whining, a little bit more clever about it, a little more subtle. So
You're a professional whiner, right? Yeah,
that's right. I got more accomplished at it because it took about 9 months for me to like worm my way into a better job at Capital One. And I was pretty relentless about it because I think, you were right. Like there weren't other jobs. And so I had sort of concluded that my best opportunity was to just get myself to a better position within the company. And it's the opportunities existed. It was just sort of, how do I get myself into one?
What's interesting is you've always had people, when you go back to college, you had that
Mhm.
professor, okay, and you go to Charles River, you had that principal or partner at
Yeah.
Charles River, right, who was guiding you. It
Yeah.
seems like you didn't have that at Capital One.
I did not right away.
And
Mm-mm.
that's really hard because now you're really on your own. You're not in the meetings, if you will,
Right.
that you need to be in order to kind of move you ahead, right?
Right.
That's why
Right.
you need a
No, I
mentor.
agree. And so it took me a while until I managed to get myself to become the chief of staff to the chief credit officer. So Capital One has chiefs of staff, and they basically are like, you basically are like part head of communications, part meeting stand in, you basically run the department for them, but it's,
Yeah, but you
you're
get
also,
that view that they
you get
have.
that view.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But part of it's administrative. Like it's not a glamorous job whatsoever. Like I had to drive my executive home from Richmond to DC in an ice storm.
Mm-hmm.
And, like that's because his driver was like, I'm not doing it. And, and so here you go. And I'm not like known for I did not get my driver's license. So I was like 18. And so I am not known for being the best driver in the world. So it was a harrowing experience.
I love it.
So
for you or for him?
Oh, he was oblivious. I mean, he had no idea. He was using it as an opportunity because he likes to use all his time efficiently. And I think his phone was dead or something. So he decided it was going to be a 2-hour career counseling session for me. And so I'm trying to drive in this ice storm, and he's trying to like figure out how to, impart wisdom on me because he needed to use his time productively.
Do you remember anything from that except being, I just want this to be over?
I was like, no, it wasn't even I want this to be over. It was like, I really hope I don't end up wrecking and killing the chief credit officer because that would be very career limiting. So that was my main.
So this guy took you, to hire you as what was the position?
Chief of staff.
Yeah, to hire you as chief of staff. He must have connected with you. He must have saw something there.
Yeah, I
Because
think
it's a tough position to get, but boy, does it get you back into networking with the right people. Obviously, yeah, it gives you great exposure.
Yeah, I think it was the tenacity. So I think that was what he liked.
Oh,
It's just I was sort of like I was a little relentless. And so so I ended up in that job, and you do it for I did it for a little over a year. And you're right, it gives you access. I mean, you really get to see how C-level executive functions
Right.
in a major company. The economy started doing better, the world started to change. And so after doing it, you get to choose your next job. And so I asked them to put me in the smallest fastest growing company, a piece of the company that they had. And so they had purchased a point of sale lending company, kind of like Green Sky, but for medical lending. And they also did construction loans. And it was out of Boston. And that's where I wanted to go next, because I wanted to be someplace where I got to see a broader.
Back to Boston.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I liked Boston. Yeah.
And so were you running that division, or did you?
No, I ran their medical product. So I basically was in charge of product, go-to-market strategy for that product, which was a set of loans that you could offer to doctors for discretionary medical procedures. So if you wanted to have a new nose, your cosmetic surgeon could offer you a Capital One loan for your procedure.
So were you actually on the street then, actually talking to the real the sell food channel, which would have been doctors, if you will?
Yeah, so that's what we worked on, and so market research and talking to doctors about what they wanted and understanding, going out with the sales reps and seeing what it was like to sell the product. Yeah, I did all that, and I loved that. I loved. I mean, that was my first B2B thing.
Well, that's
right.
actually real lending. That's on the ground lending.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's so now you sort of got out from under. I'm working way up here to here I am. I love that you chose. You said I want the smallest, fastest growing company. That's what I want to work for. Why did smallest come up? Why did that?
Because especially someplace like Capital One, like you could end up running a large dollar portfolio or credit card portfolio, but you really have control over like this much stuff. Right. And so I really wanted to see functionally. I'd never been in a business, right? At this point in my career, I'd never been in a business. So I wanted to see more, as much as I possibly could about how a business operated. I got lucky. That was probably one of the best businesses for me to go into because it had a sales force. It was completely self-contained and cross-functional in Boston, and really got to see operations. He was a general manager for the medical product. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how long did you stay there, and what made you move on?
So I was there for 3 years, and I enjoyed it. What made me move on was there was another consumer credit crisis in 2008, and it was not clear what Capital One was going to do with their non-core businesses. They eventually ended up shuttering that business. And I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and they wanted to move me to Richmond. So if I wanted to grow, it was time for me to grow. I wasn't going to be able to grow in the division we were in because it was, what was going on in the economy made that hard. People don't get cosmetic surgery when there is economic downturn, right? So that creates problems. And
so basically the market disappeared.
Well, so in these types of businesses, there ends up being two problems. The market starts to disappear, and credit losses and repayment gets poorer.
Oh yeah. Right.
So it's it's a double whammy, and it usually happens faster than, that stuff's softer than core. Like people are more likely to pay for their car because they have to drive their car every day than, the cosmetic surgery procedure that nobody can repossess.
Take that away from me, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
You can't repossess a nose job, right?
That's right. That's right. You'd be like, give me that back.
Here's your old nose.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So, I mean, those are really difficult businesses and a little less resilient economic downturns. So, I did not want to go back to Richmond or be in sort of the core card business. And so I started looking externally, and it was actually another Washington Lee alum was a COO of Revolution Money, which was Steve Case from the Revolution Fund backed startup.
The founder of
AOL. Yeah.
AOL, right.
Yep. Yep. So it was a startup in Tampa Bay, and they had just raised a lot of money, and they were building an alternative payment network. So I ended up joining there.
Tampa Bay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It just hit me.
That's a big move, to move from the Northeast like that. You're at the center of the universe when Washington, D.C. and Boston, and then you go down to Tampa.
Yeah, so at the time I had my first child. So my oldest was 1. Oh, okay. And, we were putting on little tiny mittens and, having to worry about having and dealing with the cost of living in Boston. And,
yeah, right.
So there's just something about Tampa at the time. It just hit at this right moment where we were like, oh, it'd be nice to be warm. It'll be nice to have a kid be outside all the time. And also why not?
Right. Yeah. Why not? Yeah.
Yeah. It was St. Pete. You could walk to the bay. So that's where we lived. It was in St. Pete. I could walk to work. I mean, it was in some ways a really interesting, idyllic place to live.
St. Petersburg is just beautiful. It is just beautiful down there. So that's a totally different life.
Totally different life. And I just wanted to try something else on. And so we moved, and The problem was that the consumer credit crisis that had hit, revolution that hit, it was like not just for cosmetics lending, like the whole economy just started to decay. And so here I am in a FinTech startup in St. Petersburg, Florida, in an economic downturn. And so it was hard. I mean, it was a hard 2 years.
With a 1-year-old.
With a 1-year-old.
Right. So what kind of challenges were specific to you as a woman executive? Okay. With a 1-year-old. How did it affect you? And how did you get through that? Because you could have made decisions. So I don't know, maybe I'm going to step back and be less ambitious, or I don't know what you were dealing with. Just tell me what it was.
Yeah. I mean, I was a primary breadwinner for the family. So like me not resuming work wasn't an option.
Okay.
But just the logistics and the lack of sleep is really hard with a 1-year-old. That part of the reason that we made the move to Tampa Bay was because it was easier, right? It was easier being a 15-minute walk to the office from my house to the office than it was Boston, which was like a 45-minute to 55-minute commute, maybe longer of traffic, trying to find a nanny, trying to find really expensive childcare. I mean, I do think
this fell on you, right? This was your job.
To find these things, yes, and to figure out what the plan was. And I think so. I do think, in many ways, being in these markets that are lower cost and sort of, I don't know. I do think it was easier for me to figure out how to make it all work in a Tampa Bay and then later in Atlanta than it was in Boston. I don't know what I would have done in New York.
What advice would you give to women who are in that very same position? Where they're basically an executive. They've got a 1-year-old. Like what would you tell them?
Oh, geez. I don't know. I mean, it's just so personal, right? I mean, it's personal about like what you want to do and what you're comfortable with, and also what your spouse is willing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I would say number one is just get lots of help. Like just be absolutely relentless about, try, like for every person, it's going to be different, but like, I have never been shy about finding people to help clean, cook, do my laundry, have my mom comes and visits like a week out of the month. She still does this even today. And just, having lots and lots of help.
Close to her grandson. I mean, that's
it's wonderful. Yeah. And I have 2 children now. So a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old, both boys. But like, I just think like asking for tons and tons and tons of help is been a big part of it. And then I think a lot of it has also been about just letting go of perfection, right? Like, there's just some stuff that you're just not going to be able to do. And so, having homemade cookies for all the school events may just not be your jam. and that you got to be okay with that. Because, you got to figure out how to prioritize your time and prioritize it in a way that's meaningful for your children too. And what are the things they'll remember?
I think that it makes you, that's why women in a lot of cases are more mature. I mean, you get forced into, because men don't in most cases get forced into asking for a lot of help.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you tell a guy, ask for a lot of help, and it's like, I don't need help.
Right.
You can do anything, right? But you get early on in your life, in your professional life, you get pushed into that situation and ask for a lot of help. That has a real impact on you and your effectiveness going forward.
Right.
Which is really cool. I like that. That's I just never thought about that.
You have to delegate, right? I mean, I think
absolutely.
You have to delegate
unless you do.
Yeah, like literally, you can't. You won't sleep. Won't sleep.
So you didn't stay. Were you with Revolution for a while, or?
I was almost 2 years. So I started off there doing sort of market development, BD work, and very quickly the company got smaller. So it was a difficult time, right? I mean, really sort of worrying about where the company was headed next. And it was a hard time to run that business and keep it funded. And, people weren't looking to plug into credit card companies or banks were looking to plug into an alternative payments network in the middle of a consumer credit crisis, right? So it was a very difficult time to be running that business. So I ended up taking over application development. So I ran all the software engineering, which I am not engineer at Revolution. Okay. And the reason they had me do it was because it became clear that the company was going to have to be sold at some point as a strategic asset to someone. And I was the right person to sort of help figure that out and keep the engineers focused on building functionality that made the asset work, and more appealing to potential suitors. And also, I got to manage I was good at managing the engineers. I think I learned this at Charles River Associates. So at Charles River, at the end, I was working with our metallurgists and material scientists for management consulting projects, and they were like super, super nerdy people. I say affectionately, and I had to figure out how to get their content to be sort of business friendly and readable. So sort of like translate. I was very good at translating highly technical stuff for a business audience. And so I think the engineering thing worked for me too, because it was the same deal. Like I was good at sort of bridging that gap, and really enjoyed managing the engineering team. So I managed.
So basically what you're telling me is that the nerd cheerleader showed back up.
I guess. Yeah. And my job was to keep everybody in the building. I mean, it was a pretty scary time. I mean,
that's a good point. Yeah.
It was a very
don't leave.
Don't leave, right? But there was no place to go, right? I mean, honestly, because the economic situation was so bad, there wasn't any place to go. But that doesn't mean people are happy and motivated and secure and things like that. So people were, constantly worried about what was next, what was ahead, and having to manage that was a fantastic management experience for me. And also was a fantastic management experience because I basically had to manage a function that I knew nothing about and really trust others to provide the expertise and be comfortable with that. Right. I mean, because
did you ever get down a little bit closer to the actual work that was being done, the programming itself?
Yeah. And I'm not completely yes, I did. I mean, I couldn't read. I couldn't do a code review. I mean, I could zoom.
That's what I'm asking. Sometimes people do get. I at one point, but I was much early in my career. I'm talking about early 20s. When I was working with programmers, I didn't know anything about doing that same type of function. Mm-hmm. And eventually, it's 2:00 in the morning, and I'm watching this guy do what I asked him to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm watching them, and I started asking, "What's this? What's this?" Well, before and I was able to do my own programming. But that's how I learned it. But you're at a different level than I was, and it was a different age.
Yeah, and it was just too many people. I mean, because it was we were Oracle backend, .NET front end, and then we also had a whole QA team.
It's a much more complex environment too. Yeah.
It was a very complex environment. So that was not possible. And
so where did that bring you?
So we ended up selling the business to Amex.
Okay.
And so that was very exciting. I was very thrilled that the business found a home. And so I kind of led the team through technical due diligence. And I knew that Amex wanted to move everybody to New York. I did not want to go to New York. So I reconnected with the COO of FleetCor, who happened to be a fellow Capital One alum. And he ended up hiring me to work on, marketing for fuel cards.
And I got back to Georgia.
That's how I got to Georgia. And
I shouldn't say back to Georgia. This will be a new move for you.
Yeah, it was a new move for me. And he, I never worked in commercial payments before, and I didn't really know much about fuel cards. And the company was quite small. It was pre-IPO. It was Bain and Summit backed at the time. It's probably, a couple $100 million in revenue. And today it's over $2 billion. And it was just, I really respected him. I was excited about working for him, and, thought that if he thought it was a great opportunity, he's a pretty smart guy. So it probably really was. And it just ended up being a really interesting, fantastic experience. I mean, it IPO'd a year later. double-digit growth every year. And I really got to learn about how much money you can make in commercial payments. I learned a lot about distributing a financial product into sort of blue-collar market segments, and a lot about sales-led companies. I mean, I'd been in a sales organization before, but not to this scale. And it was just a tremendous learning experience, just high-paced growth.
How old were you at the time?
I would have been, let's see, this was 11. I was sort of like mid-30s.
That is just so perfect. I mean, that's where I think that is really where we take a lot of the experience that we have from educational experience and industry experience. And then finally, we know enough. We have management experience and leadership experience, project experience. And it's such a wonderful, rich time of learning and adding value, where we never did in the past. That's really cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had a really interesting 7-year career there. Just, the business kept growing. And so I would say almost every 2 years, I'd be like, okay, it's time for me to leave. And then we would like acquire something, or something meaningful would shift in the business. And all of a sudden they were like, well, we're going to let you run Canada. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll stay, and it just kept being interesting.
Why were you always feeling like it was time to leave?
Well, because just the minute I thought that I had learned everything and sort of had mastery in my role, and I was like, oh, business is mature, nothing's going to change. I don't have anything. I've learned everything. And then we'd buy something, and all of a sudden I'd be like, oh, I get to learn, how to integrate a large chunk of the business into my portfolio. I get to learn how to take on Canada. I get to learn how to, do.
So interesting. So what were you looking to? Do you remember back to mid-30s? What were you looking to become?
I think that was when I started, and I kind of got into this when I was at Revolution Money, because I worked for the CEO, and I can't necessarily say I watched him and was like, oh, that looks like fun, because I basically saw him run a VC-backed company in probably one of the most difficult environments ever. But I did want to run something, right? I just really wanted to build. I wanted to build a company or build a business. And so I loved it
from, do you know?
I think seeing it at Revolution Money. And then, the nice thing about FleetCor is they do arrange the business units as sort of mini GMs of, and so that's so you do get to build a business. And
you said, so that's what I want to do.
Yeah. And I mean,
so all the other times that you were kind of going along in your career, you would look ahead and you would say, that's not what I want to do.
Right.
Now you finally looked ahead and said, that is what I want to do.
Yeah. I want to build a business.
Yeah.
That was so, and that
Revolution had a huge impact on you because it got you into the smaller company.
Yes. Where I realized what it'd be like. Yeah.
But I guess the Capital One deal up in that we were doing.
It was the same deal. Yeah.
Stuff, that was there too. Yeah. But I could see how because I always wondered, how do you go from these big companies? It's easy to get your Harvard MBA, be in a big company, stay in a big company, but you continue to navigate yourself to these smaller opportunities.
Yes.
That makes sense. And that felt more and more comfortable for you. That's kind of where you saw your career going.
Yeah. And I like a lot of variety. So I've always been a person that functionally likes to do different things. Yeah. So I like a lot of variety. I'm a business builder. So I'm very unhappy. I'd be a horrible person for a wind down or, right? I just would be miserable. And even just or a maintainer of a cash cow business. I'd be awful at that too.
Well, look at what you did. I mean, the most horrible job that you had in all of those jobs was writing credit policies, right?
Yes.
That was one of those things that it's just dead end. I did it. I learned it. I'm done with it. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So,
and the answer to it and the way to get out of it was the only way you could do it was to whine to people to get out of it. I love that, because you were so frustrated. That's all that was left.
Right. No, exactly. Exactly.
So then, this FleetCor thing, this is just before I met you at Angel Lounge. Did you kind of exit that whole FleetCor when it went public and all that? Did you wind up, did it create wealth for you?
It did. Yeah, it did. Not material wealth, but not, I don't want to work for the rest of my life wealth. It gave me enough.
A little bit more comfortable.
It honestly made it possible for me to think about starting my own thing. And so
Wow.
that was my
Okay.
original plan. So my original plan was to start my own thing. And I actually did that. I had this idea about basically building a sales function against digital products. So the sort of hypothesis was there are lots of B2B products, digital products out there that are being developed. And most of the people selling them are really not as focused on a direct sales model or traditional marketing tactics. They're very digital first, especially some of the earlier products. And so I had this idea about kind of creating this sort of traditional marketing and sales function to target segments that works better for digital products, B2B products. And so I started, and I had some deals to resell some different products. And I was testing it, and I had a couple phone-based telesales centers that I was testing.
Mm-hmm.
I finally found one in Houston, Texas, that was working and was high functioning. And Hurricane Harvey rolled in and wiped out the call center. So I finally felt like I'd started to figure something out, and Hurricane Harvey rolls in. And so my business was on hold. And that was how I ended up coming into RoadSync. Was because I've been sort of advising the company. I had a couple startups here in Atlanta. I was, participating in Angel Lounge, and
How did you find the Advanced Technology Development Center in Georgia Tech and all that? How did you? Because that's not an easy way to sort of get to. I mean, it's like,
I don't remember exactly how I got
was it
connected. I
Benton?
mean, no, it was not Benton. It was,
Benton
I
is
think
somebody that is she's Benton Ruth is it was executive at Fleet Corps.
that's right. That's
Okay,
right. And
and a
he is
peer of
involved.
yours, right?
He
Okay.
got me involved in Angel Lounge, but I think before that, someone introduced me to Tim Sheehan,
Oh, okay.
who at the time was before Greenlight, and he was an entrepreneur in residence at ATDC. And I was still at Fleet Corps at the time, and they were doing these industry connect things where you could come in and have a bunch of startups pitch to you. And so I started doing that and bringing my product team in to see some startups pitch to us. And that was sort of how I started to get to know some of the people. And
did you see that Tim just raised money, $260 million?
Oh my gosh, that's just mine. I did. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing to think about what those guys have built over the last couple of years.
So you're pretty impressed, huh?
I am. I mean, and it also is so great for Atlanta to build those types of companies here. I mean,
we haven't seen billion-dollar companies. The only thing that we saw that was a billion-dollar company was ISS.
mm-hmm.
Internet security systems were bought by IBM, I think, at $1.3 billion. And we
Yep.
were all aghast at that. And now what we
Yep.
have is Salesloft and
Yep.
and Calendly and Greenlight. These are all unicorns right here in Atlanta, which is pretty cool. But you have one right here in FinTech.
Yes.
In Greenlight, which is exciting for you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's go back to this. I remember the guy before it was RoadSync. I believe it was called Lumper.
MyLumper. Yes.
MyLumper. Okay. I saw that pitch at Flashpoint.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Which is an accelerator here in Atlanta. Was an accelerator here in Atlanta. And I remember saying, I'm not sure that this guy can build a business. That's always as an investor. That's one of the first places you go for startups, because it really is all you have is the person. I mean, there's the idea, but without the right person to kind of lead that, you don't know. So what happened and how did you come around to becoming the CEO of MyLumper?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, part of it was, I was familiar with the business for a while and had sort of, I wouldn't say I was a formal advisor, but I provided some support. So I'd kind of gotten accustomed to what they were doing and how they were thinking about attacking the market and what the business problem is that they were trying to solve. And, so what had really happened is the three original core founders, including Achman, the guy that you'd met, had sort of ended up getting put together in Flashpoint through the incubator program, or very shortly thereafter. And I just think it's a story about what happens when your co-founding team doesn't really know each other very well.
So they were put together.
Yeah, they found each other. So one of the so Achman, I think, went into Flashpoint as a solo founder, and then there was a founder who'd been in, one of his co-founders had been in a different business previously, so he got put in. And then they had an advisor to the company that was part of Techstars that put in the third person. It was like, so these people got put together in a very short period of time.
Really hard.
Really hard, right? It's really hard. And they just don't have, I mean, they have a common goal, but they just, the connection and all can be difficult. And
who had the passion for the market and the issue that needed to be?
Yeah, so Achman ran a small logistics business. The other two folks had never been in logistics businesses before, and so Achman had run a logistics business and sort of saw firsthand that when you run a logistics business, it's all paper based. I mean, it's nuts. Everything, all financial transactions are done with paper and phone calls. It's very cumbersome, very time consuming, and this is a giant industry that runs this way. And so that was
So he identified the problem.
Yeah, because he experienced it, right? I mean, he had firsthand, he got called in the middle of the night because a lumper, who's somebody who needs to unload a vehicle, needed to be paid. And so a truck driver needed to be issued some sort of payment, which is usually the industry form that was being used was a fleet check. Yeah. So they needed a fleet check code. And he's like, why are all these people throughout the country being woken up in the middle of the night because somebody needs to get paid? That doesn't make sense in, a rapidly digitizing world. So that was his personal experience. And so, the three of them had not been together terribly long. And, there's just, lots of turmoil and probably not a lot of mutual trust. And it just, the company started to had a pilot in market that looked promising.
And they raised up to that time. Do you remember?
A little over $1 million in angel funding. And so they just fell apart. It was clear they were not going to be able to stay together. And so, Achman felt like there was, it was all three of them, right? I mean, it was just, and the board also had to get involved. And
was there an involved angel, somebody that was leading?
Yes, there was also involved angels as well that are circling the business. And so everybody knew that it wasn't going to be able to continue as is. And I think the question was, what did the business have? And was there something? So what should the angels, was there enough there to continue to fund?
Enough there, right?
Right. Is there enough there? And then also, who's going to take it forward, right? I mean, because the two founders that were going to stay with the business were not the ones with the industry experience.
So
and
business,
what
this guy, the lumper guy?
Yeah, he was out. So he agreed that it was
to be out.
He did, yeah, wow. He did. Yeah, he knew it wasn't going to work with the three. Like, if I think he understood that if he stayed in, it was just not that wasn't going to work. And so, which is hard. I mean, I think it's a really hard decision to make.
What you're telling me though is that it's probably the investors didn't have the confidence that he was going to be the person that's going to take this forward and kind of from where it was there to this meltdown back up again. And so, as an investor, it's tough. It's like, because in startups at that early stage, when there isn't much there.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah. And, I think, who knows, like, in retrospect, like if it would have been a different group of three and, were there scenarios where it would have been,
it wasn't,
right. But I think given what
happened.
what happened, like that it was what it was. Right. And so, I think he knew that in that context, he was not going to be able to take it forward.
How did you come on the scene?
Well, so my project had basically been wiped out by Hurricane Harvey. I was sort of twiddling my thumbs, being like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to wait for my business to start back up again? So that, and I could continue to sort of build the business. That was my idea. And had some free time, and the initial angels had asked me to come in and take a look and give them some advice on what to do. Do we do a bridge? Do we find somebody else? What do we do with this business? And I got to see it in action in a couple of warehouses that were our beta clients. And the product was very, very, very basic. And they just, the customers loved it. They just loved it. They were like, this is so much easier. It's so much easier to do payments. This is amazing. And after
these days to find first generation automation markets,
it's
like impossible, right? Everything's been automated like 50 times now.
Yep.
Which this is very discerning. So when you get into a first time automation, they're anything but discerning. Anything is better than what they were doing, right?
It was amazing. I mean, it was like, our initial product was like a Google form. I mean, it was so basic. And I mean, I don't think it literally was a Google form, but it was not very far from it.
Right.
And it just to see how like life changing and sort of changing it was in the daily, the work lives of these businesses was really cool. And so, my goal was to build a business. Like that was my goal. And I didn't necessarily care under what circumstances I built the business, right? Like it didn't need to be all mine. It didn't need to be my idea. It didn't, I just was excited about building a business. And so they asked me if I wanted to take it over. And I was like, yeah, I'll take it. I want to do it. So, I decided that I was willing to take it.
You said I'll take it. What was the thing that there was something that excited you, and then there was something that really concerned you?
So taking over an existing business is super hard, even if it was tiny, right? Like,
well, that makes it even harder because you have no resources. Okay.
Right. Well, it's super tiny, but there's also like, the existing team is the existing team, the existing investors. I'm like, I didn't choose any of the things that were around me in the company, right? I didn't choose the original investors. I didn't choose the original team. I didn't sell the, beta clients. So I didn't know what they were told. So like you do have, it was sort of some ways it was like you have a product that's works. So you sort of have something to work with, but the other token, you also have all this baggage that's not common when you start something from scratch. And so that was hard. And like, you just don't know what you don't know. And so I spent, I was all in. I was very excited about taking over. I raised a bridge round from our angels. I'm very grateful for them for investing. That was
probably your deal on the way in. I'll take over, but you've got to give me a little runway here, right?
Yes. But in retrospect, I should ask for more. I did not ask for enough.
You had them then. That was.
I know. And it just, I just didn't realize. I mean, gosh, it's funny. I was talking to one of the original angels, and he had brought his nephew and daughter to come and meet me, and we had coffee. And he was telling them, he goes, "You don't realize what she did. She just did this crazy thing. It's much harder to take over something that's super, 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 super early, that's somebody else's, than it is in some ways to build it yourself." And I was like, why did you tell me this when you wrote me the check? Because no one told me. I was tremendously naive.
How many people were in the business when you walked in?
5.
5. The founder was not part of that group, right?
That's right.
He left.
Yeah.
But the other 2 founders were still there.
Yeah. And he was helpful. I mean, he was, if I needed him to make intros and whatever, I think, that he was helpful.
Did he have a trailing interest in the business? Did he still?
Yeah.
Have equity in it. And he still does.
Yeah. He still does. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
Yeah. His wife actually was one of our first employees and is still an employee of the company.
Well, that says a lot.
Doing support.
That says a lot about you. That's wonderful.
Yeah. She's wonderful. So, I think that, we wanted to make it work, right? And make it work for him and his family. And
so you raised the bridge round.
Yeah.
And then what do you do?
So then I had to work on sort of monetizing the early customers, so get them on agreements, I had to work on.
This is when you say monetizing, a fancy way for saying I had to prove to future investors that people would actually pay for this service.
Pay. Yeah. Because the original pilots were, not
free, right? Yeah.
Free or very, very close to free. May as well have been free. So we had to do that. And then we had to scale the platform so that, people could we could have multiple users on it. And then I very quickly had to raise our first seed. Because
to that, can I back up just a second? And how did you get to the point of this monetization? What role did you play? I mean, there's only 5 of you, so it had to be you as the lead. What did you do? Because this is something that a lot of startups get stuck at, is saying, how do I get that first dollar in, right?
Yeah.
From the clients, as opposed to the first dollar in from the investors, right? I mean, those are 2 different things.
Yeah.
So how did you get to that?
I think the good news is there was an expectation that the product there was a pricing construct already set into the pilot. So, trying to make it look like something that already existed was pretty important. So the way we priced our product, we're like Square for the logistics industry, sort of, right? And so the way we really priced the product was looking like Square, like a percentage of the transaction amount, some low platform fees, sort of usage-based pricing. So it looked like something that was already market standard. So the pricing conversation wasn't, oh, what is this worth to you? Is it $1? Is it da-da-da? Should we pay it this way? It was really like, hey, point of sale systems are priced this way. We let you try this for free. Now we're going to price it like a point of sale system. And,
it's really nice to be to be selling in a recognized category, if you will, right? Because
correct.
All of that is resolved. Yeah. And that's
correct.
So you leaned on that.
You lean on that. And I would recommend everybody think about that. Even if you don't think that exists for your product, think about all the other things that the business buys. Think about the other products that look like your product. Like, really try to mirror something that feels familiar. Because to the extent that you can do that, people are like, because I mean, I know it sounds strange that we monetize, but we really just were sort of like, here, okay, you like it, you want to keep using the products, now time to pay for it. And we're like, this is the pricing model, because this is how these similar products are situated. And it wasn't hard to necessarily.
There's some advice that I give is to say, people say, how should I price this? And I say, look, how does the market currently, buy that kind of product, and what do they currently pay for it? And if you are an outlier from that, you're not going to go very far, or it's going to take you forever. And that's what you did. You said, this is how they pay for, for transaction financial services now, and this is how they'll pay for this. And off they went.
Yeah.
Made it really easy. So, but you had to ask for the order. Okay. You got to pay me now. And they said, yes.
Yes.
And that was the monetization.
Turning point. Yeah, because most of them were using us. A lot of our customers were sort of multi-site customers. And so it was about taking it from one site into multiple sites. So it was kind of like, hey, you like it, you see how it's working. We weren't going to roll out the rest of the site without that resolved, right? So to the extent that people wanted it and they did think it was materially better for their business. And I mean, I will give the original founders a lot of credit for getting those initial customers on. I think that's, I think it's a lot. I think it's really hard to get the first 5. Getting the first, 5 folks onto your product to even try it, I think is way harder than getting them to pay for it.
Yeah, I call that sort of that pitch is, I call it painting the sky, right? I mean, you say, it's going to be great, it's different, it's better, it's all this. You need to really kind of, right? And it's like, no, you get too many people that just say, well, I'm doing it this way, it works fine,
Yeah.
We've always done it this way. And you got to find those early adopters, if you will, right? That say, no, it's not fine. I'll try it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's you're putting your whole credibility. You're the only credibility, I'd say, and you put it at risk, which is pretty cool. But it's interesting. I was interested in knowing, like, it's difficult to take over a business from a founder, but you got in so early on, that it's almost like you really were viewed as a founder, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different, right? taking over a pre-revenue company.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, taking over pre-revenue versus taking over some $10 million company from a founder. That would be a whole different situation. Yeah.
Yes, because you're still early enough that there really isn't much of a team. There's not much of a culture. There's not much of a, customer base. So there's just not that much there. And so you do have a chance to like basically redo a lot. So that's good. But the con is it's a lot of risk early. Right. I mean, it's
something you brought up. You said there isn't a culture there. And I just have to ask this question because when you went to Europe and you were visiting, this is before you knew even what business was, right? You start visiting these different businesses thinking, well, who would I work for? Will I work for a French bank? Nope, not going to work for a French. So now here you are. And I always say this to entrepreneurs when I say, this is your opportunity to create your culture.
Yep.
Right? So you now had a lot of experience in a lot of different businesses with a lot of different cultures.
Yep.
How did you approach, did you think culture or did culture just sort of show up because it's just who you are and how you operate? You follow me?
Yeah. I mean, I will say the first year I just thought cash flow and growth. Like that's all I thought about.
That's part of the culture. That's
all I thought about was like cash flow and growth. And that was all I was completely fixated on that. And so I think that, and because both of our early fundraising rounds, I am not embarrassed to admit that were cut down to the wire, right? I mean, like, you're just like, please wire the check so I can make payroll, just like, super, super tight. And
this isn't the bridge round. This is a later round.
Oh, those are like I think our seed and Series A were both, we were tighter timing wise on cash flow than I necessarily would have liked. So, which is not unusual, right? I mean, I've heard tons of people tell that story too. Even like big companies here in Atlanta who I'll let their founders remain unnamed.
Elon Musk with Tesla, he was against the wall like 2 times, like it was over.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say we were against the wall. Like I had options. I had bridge options and stuff like that. Like it wasn't like I was against the wall, but I did not want to.
Pretty close to it.
Yeah, I didn't want to tap into that. And so, I basically ran out the clock to the last possible second. So that was no fun. So yeah, I would say I was pretty maniacally focused on, results, early customers and cash flow in the beginning. I think that recently we've been thinking a lot, not even recently, I think since the Series A, I've been thinking a lot about the company I wanted to build and the culture I want us to have. And also trying to maintain that in a pandemic, I think is super hard, right? I mean, we have, more than doubled our employee footprint since the pandemic. And so there's all these people who've never even worked together, never even been in the RoadSync office. And how do you create a culture around that? So we've been more thoughtful about how to be deliberate, how to talk about our culture. And I do think it is a reflection of the CEO. I like autonomy. I like to try new things. I am very direct and straightforward in my communications and, really in many ways expect the culture to reflect that.
Yeah, I remember that was, I wrote a blog on this once when I was partners with Richard Brock. And I had somebody else that was on our leadership team. And he was all about this culture thing and all that. And we didn't even talk about cultures back then. Nobody talked. The books weren't written about cultures, but he was on it. He was an MBA. And he got me all twisted up. And I remember Richard Brock, he called the meeting and he said, we're meeting Saturday at 9 a.m. We're going to talk about culture. And it was the shortest meeting I ever attended. He said, you want to know what the culture, he looked at the both of us. We were across the table from me. So you want to know what the culture is in this company? I'm the culture. That's the culture in this company. And, that sounded rude. And then that was the end of the meeting. And he said, if you don't like the culture here, then leave. Okay. But he was right. The CEO is the culture in these smaller companies and even in bigger companies. They even say that in Washington, D.C., when a new president is elected, it creates a new culture in the city.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
So here you are saying, yeah, this is who I am. And I think when you get back to is how do I describe my culture? You're really describing you,
Yes.
you know?
It took me a long time to realize that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that was obvious to me in the beginning. Because it sort of feels egocentric, like very like egotistical to be like, I am the culture. Like that statement when you're telling me the story, it's like, ooh, yuck. I can't believe somebody did that. Even though it's true, it feels like a weird thing to say. But I view it less as like the company is a reflection of me and more as I have an obligation for how I show up and how it's like I'm the steward of the company's culture in that regard, right? Like it's a service.
But that
So
attitude is also part of the culture.
yeah,
You
I guess you're
see?
right.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
how you think and how you approach things. And it's not like you're saying, normally what I would do is just beat these people into submission, but I think it would be healthier if I was nicer, you know? So I'm going to
Yep.
change. You're not going to change.
Right.
Robin's
Right.
been Robin from the time that from the time that you were in high school. You kind
Right.
of just continued to refine and define yourself as you went
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
brought you to
Yeah.
this point where you've been very successful.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty
This
cool.
is the hardest thing I've ever done,
Is
to
it?
be honest. And I knew it would be when I took it on, and it was even harder. But it's
How long have you been doing this now?
so since late 2017.
Okay, so it's 3.5
But
years.
yeah, almost 4. It'll be 4 in September.
Okay, so 4
And
years.
yep, and I think it's been definitely one of the biggest adventures. Being an entrepreneur running this company has been personally transformational in ways I have not expected. It's part of my identity now. It's just I think it has been such a fantastic.
Now? How do you self-identify?
I do it. I identify as being an entrepreneur means something to me now. I thought it was ridiculous that people would say I'm an entrepreneur. I was like, oh my gosh,
No.
like what are you talking about?
Everybody, it's too easy to say that. Okay,
That's right.
It's
That's
harder
right.
to say I'm a doctor. Okay, but it's very easy to say I'm an entrepreneur.
That's
It
right.
doesn't require anything but a statement.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So what is it? What is an entrepreneur? What did you learn from all that?
Yeah, that I love to build things, and that I love to create things that that I also, there's just even something about the like, sort of I don't know, I won't say it, it's not the autonomy and the, kind of personal responsibility I have for the company and my investor, I guess the stewardship idea. And I don't mean it as like
tremendous amount of accountability is what you're describing there.
Yes. And that personal accountability and it's kind of like embracing the loneliness of it sometimes quite and the scariness of it, as well as like the wins and the great moments, I think has been one of is why I call it so personally transformational. There's been nothing else that has required that of me that has been such a phenomenal experience to kind of bring all that to light and to make it feel very real. And so I wake up.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you said this is the hardest thing I've ever done, what makes it so hard? What, as you look, is it, and I'm not talking about what makes it so hard out there. Okay. I mean, the obvious things, right? Lack of resources, new markets, right. Putting more teams, hiring a lot of people. What makes it so hard in here?
It's the conversation you have with yourself, right? And just the requirement that it makes you have to be a little bit fearless. You have to be resilient. You have to be tenacious. I mean, there's just a lot of. I mean, I guess you see people.
You're speaking now in second person. Okay.
Yeah.
What about first person? It's like, can you replace those instead of what I need to be? Is what you had to learn about yourself?
Yeah, I had to learn that I was those things, right? That I was those things and that I could do it and that I could ask for what I needed for the business. I could ask for business. I could recruit a great team. I had built something that was deserving of all of that. And
But in
so,
short, I can do it.
yeah, I think it's yes,
And it takes a
yes,
long time, we're getting toward the end of our time, but it takes a long time. And you've had so many trials through your life,
yeah,
as I think, the identity trial of, uh, I love that cheerleader story, the
yeah,
identity trial of wanting to fit in,
yeah,
yet knowing it wasn't you, in effect, right?
hmm,
But part of it is you. You are a cheerleader in that regard. You're a
yeah,
leader, okay?
yeah,
The other thing, like when you went to Harvard and you sat there and had to write down, I need to talk today, right, in
hmm,
class, right? That
yep,
elbowing in and getting past that, feeling rude. I love
yep,
that.
yep,
And each step of the way, the having a child and having to go to work and having to ask for help, and you've had all of these things that you've been fighting through, and this has been, for you to say, this being an entrepreneur has been the toughest thing that I've ever done. So it's sort of the
yep,
pinnacle, the capstone, if you will, of
yep,
your struggles. you
yeah,
know
yeah,
That's a
yeah.
pretty cool story. I think that is magnificent. So, what's the future hold for RoadSync? And
Yeah,
why did you get rid of what? That's the other thing. That's always a big
oh,
decision.
stop.
Why
You
did you
don't have
get
to
rid
ask
of?
me that.
Why did you get rid of MyLumper and become Road?
Stop it, Charlie.
I
Seriously, you
remember
wanted
when
me to be the lady CEO of MyLumper? Like, that's just not going to happen.
Oh, I never
So,
thought of it that way. I didn't even put the
no,
female side to this.
no, it was just not. No, that's just wrong.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't. I really didn't. I'm innocent. I'm innocent. Okay.
So,
What I thought back is when I remember when he said my lumper and I saw that presentation, I said, "What's a lumper?" And he had
yes.
every time he pitched, he had to define what a
Oh my
lumper was.
God. Yeah.
And
No. Yeah,
so
it's
I agree.
horrible.
I thought it was great that you changed the name, but
Well, it's also because our aspirations are to power payments more broadly throughout the
yeah.
ecosystem and not just lumper payments, not just a subcategory. And so
So
it really needed a broader.
what does the future hold? How's it going?
Yeah, it's going great. Like we are very focused on automating payments for the transportation industry, period, right? Not just payments to people like lumpers or other
Uh-huh.
vendors that take payments from truckers, but you know, the truckers themselves are often getting paid in paper or invoicing and have to deal with a lot of paper. Their employers who are carriers and brokers also are dealing with lots of paper invoicing and paper payments. And so we really think that by getting the entire industry plugged into our platform, not only can we digitize these core payments, but then you can actually use it as a way to deploy more financial products, which they are underserved in terms of having best in class lending, payroll, banking solutions. And you really can do more for people. And so that's really our vision, is to reimagine sort of the financial solutions for the logistics industry and really provide them with better products. They are deserving of it. This is a huge part of and critical part of the U.S. economy,
Yeah.
and really just are excited about doing that.
Well, you're in a
So
great
we
space
continue to
there.
grow. Hmm?
Well, you're in a great space, but one of the things that happens is when a startup like this, like you said, everything was manual, and now
Yeah,
we've sort of discovered this problem, we've solved this problem. Okay,
yeah,
we become the leader in this area. As soon as there's money to be made, all of the other traditional lenders, right, all the other credit card companies, fintech companies, they start piling in. How has that affected you?
yeah. I mean, obviously the space has gotten a lot more competitive since we
Hmm.
first started this business. I think our basic philosophy is to partner with other fintech solutions. So we are not somewhat payment agnostic and want to bridge the gap between certain payment products that already exist in the market. So I do think that's a differentiator. And I have those relationships because I come from that industry and it's
Yeah,
easier for me
right.
to do that. I think another way we compete is this is a hard market to execute in. And so really having a fantastic sales execution focus. And I mean, FleetCor is a phenomenal sales organization. And so really learning what I learned in that experience about distribution and being maniacal about how to get your products into market effectively is really helpful to us. And so sometimes people win not because they have the best idea or the best product, but because they can execute ruthlessly. And so that's really what we've been focused on.
Yeah. I did. I've talked to several entrepreneurs, and what it really does come down to is you think it's all about the idea, and the real value is built in execution. And big companies
That's right.
are great at execution.
That's right.
And
That's right.
and I have no doubt that you are great at what you do. This has been a fun
Thank
time
you.
together.
Yes, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Together. You never thought something would take this long, but here we are. We're a couple hours into this deal, and you've been so gracious with your time.
Yeah, thank you.
You're a busy lady and a busy CEO.
Thanks for having me.
But please, I apologize about the question about MyLumper. I really did not think about what you just said. Like, really, Charlie? Now I get it, and I'm sorry about that. But
That's
thanks
okay.
so much. Well, I'll close us out here, and then we'll end this. Okay. Well, thank you, folks. This has been a lot of fun talking to Robin. Lots of great stories, and you can see this thread of her life and how she defined who she is, and now here she is running a great company, and that culture of that company is who she is. Just as any entrepreneur, when they start, the company will eventually have a culture that's based in and around their founders. So thanks to Robin, and thanks for you for attending. If you'd like to sign up and not miss an episode, go to paparelli.com. In the meantime, good entrepreneuring. Take care.